Hi friends, today we are going to see the past year NEET questions for the chapter Transport in Plants. And today in this video we will cover part 1. Now let's begin with the first question here today. Read the question here. Water vapors come out from the plant leaf through the stomatal opening. Yes, we all know that. That is why plant with which has low water concentration, especially the plants which survive in hot areas, their stomata will be condensed. So water vapor comes out from the plant leaf through the stomatal opening. Through the same stomatal opening, carbon dioxide diffuses into the plant during photosynthesis. Reason out the above statements using one of the following options. So here the question is very clear. They are asking us water vapor comes out through the stomatal opening. Same water, at the same time carbon dioxide also diffuses into the stomatal opening. So when these two processes are happening, can it happen simultaneously or can it happen together, or is it only during night time, only during daytime? So that we need to discuss here. So what is stomatal opening first? When I say stomatal opening, that is where the water enters, carbon dioxide enters, and that is where the, see, when I say stomatal opening, that is the entry for both. Okay, that is why the plants which are staying or which are present in the hot areas, especially desert areas, their stomata is condensed, like cactus and all. If you see, they are called as xerophytes because their stomata is condensed, that this prevents the water loss. Now the stomatal opening is very important for a plant. Now coming back to the solution of this question, see, in actively growing plants, water is continuously evaporating from the surface of the leaf, okay, surface of the leaf, through stomatal opening exposed to air, and we all know that, right? This is called as transpiration. So what do you call that concept as? Transpiration. Okay, now through the same stomatal opening, carbon dioxide diffuses into the plant during photosynthesis. So see, there's nothing called night and day. Okay, photosynthesis, we all know it occurs in the day only because it will take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. Now that process where it takes in, the process by which the water which evaporates to the surface, that is called as transpiration. Therefore, the correct answer to this question is C. Both carbon dioxide diffusion and water diffusion, if you see, they happen together because the diffusion coefficient of both are different. Okay, they occur at different rates, or you can say like that. Therefore, it will occur or it will happen together. Therefore, the correct option to this question is option B. Both processes can happen together because the diffusion coefficient of water and carbon dioxide is different. Okay, now let's move to the next question here. This question was asked in the year 2013. Okay, which one of the following criteria does not pertain to facilitated transport? Right, now you should know what is facilitated transport. We know there are different types of transport. What are the different types of transport that you know? It can be active, passive. That is, we talk about the concentration of the diffusion. It can be water or it can be any minerals. Okay, so that is what we talk about the transport system. Now coming on to facilitated transport. Okay, you have even facilitated diffusion, but facilitated transport can be described as how can you define this? It can also be defined as a passive mediated transport. It is a process of spontaneous passive transport of molecules or ions across a biological membrane via specific transmembrane integral proteins. So how can you define facilitated transport? Facilitated transport or facilitated diffusion both mean the same. It is also called as passive transport, and here if you see, the molecules or the ions will move across a biological membrane via the transmembrane integral proteins. So it is with the help of the integral proteins. Okay, fine. Now which of the following criteria does not pertain to facilitated transport? Is it high selectivity, transport saturation? As I already said, it is dependent upon the transfer of the ions and molecules. but that is via the transmembrane, and that is via the integral proteins, right? Now, which is not pertaining, if you see, substances that have hydrophilic moiety find it difficult to pass through the membrane. Their movement has to be facilitated by membrane protein without the expenditure of ATP energy. And facilitated diffusion cannot cause net transport of molecules from a low to high energy concentration. So, when we talk about from a low to high energy, okay, the concept is from the low to high energy concentration. That can also be called as uphill transport, which is option C. This is difficult. They require a special feature for it and a special energy for it. They should not use ATP also, because if you start using ATP for this kind of transport, then the plant will not get energy. Therefore, which of the following criteria that does not pertain to the facilitated transport is the uphill transport? Option C is the answer for this question. Okay, so here if you can see, transport rate reaches a maximum. So in the solution part you can see transport rate reaches a maximum when all the protein transports are being used. That is called as saturation. And facilitated diffusion is very specific and it requires a special feature for it. You need a membrane protein for that. Therefore, the correct answer to this question is option C, uphill transport. Now let's move to the question here. This question was asked in the year 2000. Movement of ions or molecules in a direction of opposite to that of prevailing electrochemical gradient is known as. Now, what do you mean by electrochemical gradient? How can you define it? Do you have an answer? Electro means electrochemical. I'm talking about an electrochemical gradient is a gradient of electrochemical potential, right? It is usually for an ion that can move across the membrane. The gradient will consist of two parts. Always remember, the gradient will consist of two parts. That is the chemical gradient or the difference in the solute concentration across the membrane, and the electric gradient. So what are the two gradients that we saw? Electrical and chemical. We have two, right? Electrical gradient and chemical gradient. Okay, so when we talk about chemical gradient, it is also called as a difference in the solute concentration across the membrane, and electric gradient can be described as a difference in the charge. So this depends upon the solute, while this depends upon the charge. Now you know what is, now you can understand what is electrochemical gradient. Now the movement of ions or molecules, okay, what system does it use? Out of the four options given here, movement of the ions against the concentration gradient involves the expenditure of energy. So when we require these kind of movement, we always require an energy system. Okay, we need expenditure of energy. What do you mean by expenditure? The cost. I mean, you have to spend energy for that, right? So likewise, movement of ions against concentration gradient involves the expenditure of energy, as we all know. Diffusion involves the movement of solute particles from the region of higher to the lower, it is from higher to the lower concentration, right? Now you're given four options here. Okay, now the correct answer goes to active transport. Okay, active transport. Now what happens here in pinocytosis? It is called as cell drinking. Okay, Brownian movement is a random to and from movement of atoms and molecules. So when we talk about the movement of ions or molecules in the direction opposite to the prevailing electrochemical gradient. So here if you see, it starts from the higher concentration and move towards the lower concentration. I told you what is diffusion, what is active transport, pinocytosis and Brownian movement. Pinocytosis is also called as cell drinking. Brownian movement is a backward of to and fro. It's a random movement of to and fro. So here they are talking about the movement of molecules in the direction opposite. So the correct answer is option B, active transport. Next question. Okay, now read this question here. See if you can understand it. You have some abbreviations here, right? You see DBD, then you see TP. What do you mean by DPD? What do you mean by DPD? We can also call that as DPD gradient. Okay, let's read the question here. If a cell A with DPD 4 bars is connected to the cell B, C and D, whose OP and TP are respectively 4 and 4, 10 and 5 and 7 and 3 bars, the flow of water will be. So how will the water be? Remember, when a cell is put in a hypertonic solution, what do you mean hypertonic? A solution with high concentration of solutes, then the solution will contain high concentration of solutes than the solute concentration. A water potential, what is DBD first of all? I'm asking what is DBD in biology? It is called as diffusion pressure deficit. How can you abbreviate it? See, DBD stands for many abbreviations when it comes to this, when it comes to different subjects. According to biology, it is called as diffusion pressure deficit. Okay. Now I gave you the full form of that. Now what you mean by OP? You have to know, right? What is OP? When I say OP, you always have to remember that. See here we are talking about the movement of the water. Okay, movement of water. See, you're given 4 things here: A, B, C and D. Okay, four things here. And I told you what is DBD, diffusion pressure deficit. Now DBD is equal to OP minus WP. Okay, so now we'll go into detail with the solution here. See, DBD or the suction pressure, you can call it as SP. Okay, hence DBD for A is equal to 4 bars and B is equal to 0 bars and C is equal to 5 bars, D is equal to 4 bars. So as we are asked in the question, I have abbreviated here to your right side. We know that the direction of the movement of the water is lower to higher, right? It is from the lower to the higher. Since I gave you the clue now, lower to higher, just compare the values there. You have A4, B0, so B is the less of all here. Since it is lower to higher concentration, it should start from B. That is why the flow will be from B. Next you have A which is again 4. So A, then then it will come as C. C has 5 bars and D has 4 bars. So if you look clearly, you can see here, right? So it is moving from the lower to the higher concentration. So the correct answer to this question is option C, B to A, C and D. See, B is 0, right? I'm sorry, B is 0 here, so 0 to 4. And out of C and D, C is 4 and D is, C is 5 and D is 4. Okay, so here if you see, it is B to A, C and D. Actually, the initial thing, it starts from the lower concentration. If you clearly see here, it starts with B. Okay, so always remember, when you talk about DBD, it is called as suction pressure, or you can call it as diffusion pressure deficit. Here the concentrations, the movement actually happens from the lower to higher concentration. So look in for the lower concentration and mark the answer. Okay, next question. Now this question was asked in the year 1996. Okay, let's read it here. The movement of mineral ions into plant root cells as a result of diffusion is called as. Okay, so you're given 4 options here: osmosis, active absorption, passive absorption, endocytosis. So it cannot be endocytosis, it should be either of the option A, B and C. Now we'll go one by one. Okay, what is osmosis? Osmosis is a movement of solvent particles from a region of lower solute to the, to the lower solute to the higher concentration, right? Yeah, osmosis is a movement of solvent particles from a region of lower solute concentration to a region of higher solute concentration through a selectivity permeable membrane. Okay, now active absorption involves ATP molecules. It uses the involvement of the ATP molecules. Now what you mean by passive absorption? I told you for active transport it requires the usage of the ATP molecules. Now passive transport is a movement of ions and other atomic or molecular substance across the cell membrane, okay, without the need of energy input. Unlike active transport, we saw that it requires the usage of ATP, right? It uses the usage of ATP. So here the movement of mineral ions into the plant root as a result of diffusion is through, without the expenditure of energy, is through the passive absorption. Okay, therefore the correct answer is option C. Next question. This question was asked in the year 1993. Can we read it? Active and passive transports across the cell membranes will differ in dash. Active and passive transports across cell membrane differ in dash. Okay, you're given 4 options here. Passive transport is non-selective. No. Is it non-selective? No. Passive transport is along the concentration gradient, while active transport is due to metabolic energy. Active transport, option C, active transport is more rapid. And option D, passive transport is confined to anions while active transport is confined to cations. As I already said in the earlier slide, the difference between active and passive transport. Now when we come to active transport, it requires the use of ATP. Okay, and that ATP is got through metabolic energy. Metabolic pathway also you can say, because as we eat, the food that we eat is getting converted in the form of ATP, which is stored as energy in the body, and we use it for different action or the work that we do in our day-to-day life. So the correct answer is option B. Passive transport is along the concentration gradient, while active transport is dependent, or it is due to the metabolic energy. It is dependent upon the ATP. While passive transport, if you see, does not require any energy input. It is a process which depends upon the concentration gradient of the of the ions and molecules or atoms. It depends upon that. Therefore, the correct answer to this question is option B. Passive transport is along the concentration gradient. So here you can see the difference between the active transport, passive transport, diffusion and facilitated diffusion. Okay, 1 is active transport here, 2 is telling you about the passive transport. Say all that you have to know is the difference between the active and the passive transport, which requires energy, which does not require energy. Now let's move to the next question here. This question was asked in the year 2017. The water potential of pure water is dash. So this is an easy question, right? I think by now you would have guessed the answer. See, by convention, the water potential of pure water is standard temperature. You always have to remember it will be a standard temperature. I'm sorry, it is a standard temperature. Okay. So what happens when we say standard temperature? What is the meaning of that? It is not under any pressure. Since it is in the standard pressure, the water potential will always be 0. Okay, therefore the correct answer to this question is option D, 0. By convention, the water potential of pure water at standard temperature, which is not under any pressure, is always taken to be 0. Therefore, the correct answer is option D, 0. Okay, now moving on to the next question. It was asked in the year 2015. Which one gives the most valid and recent explanation of stomatal movements? Okay, we'll go one option by option. Potassium influx and efflux. B is starch hydrolysis. See, starch hydrolysis we can understand, right? Lysis means breaking down. When I say starch hydrolysis, it is breaking down. Hydro means water, water breakdown from the starch hydrolysis. Guard cell photosynthesis and transpiration. Transpiration we saw in the first slide. What we saw in that? We saw that the diffusion of water and carbon dioxide takes place, and when water vapor comes out from the stomata, when water gets vaporized and it comes out of stomata, you call that as transpiration. Now, the opening and the closing of stomata are caused by the influx and efflux. Okay, opening and closing. Okay, the increase of K plus results in the opening of stoma and the decrease in K plus. So all this is dependent upon the K plus concentration, potassium concentration. When the K plus is increased, okay, it will open, and when K plus decreases, it will close. Okay, now the turgidity of the guard cells induces the opening of the pores of stomata found on the surface of the leaves. What do you mean by turgid? Rigidity, right? So I've given you a clue of what the answer is. The correct answer is the potassium influx and efflux. So which one gives the most valid and the recent explanation of stomatal movements is this? So always remember, whenever you talk about the stomatal opening, it depends upon the potassium concentration. When the potassium concentration is set to increase, it will open, and when it's set to decrease, it will close. Therefore, the correct answer to this question is option A, potassium influx and efflux. Next question. This question was asked in the year 2004. When a fresh water protozoan possessing a contractile vacuole is placed in a glass containing marine water, the vacuole will dash. So this question was asked in the year 2004. Now coming to the solution part. Now what are protozoans? Before we go directly into the solution, you should know what are protozoans. See, protozoans are a set of microorganisms. Okay. I'll give you an example here. Let's take the malarial parasite, Plasmodium. So this is actually a protozoan. There are many other diseases or disorders which are caused by protozoans. Many intestinal infections or stomach infections, disorders caused in elephantiasis, all these are examples of protozoan diseases. So here, when a freshwater protozoan possessing a contractile vacuole, okay, a freshwater protozoan when placed in marine water medium, loss of water takes place, that is osmosis, X-osmosis you can call that as. Hence the contractile vacuole will decrease in size. Okay, what you need to understand here is, you are placing it in a glass containing marine water. The vacuole will decrease in size because there is loss of water. Okay, there is loss of water. When the water is set to loose, then imagine how the vacuole will expand. There is no chance for it to expand. Therefore, only it will decrease in size. Okay, the correct answer to this question is option D, decrease in size. Now, let's move to the next question here. This question was asked in the year 2007. Two cells A and B are contagious. What do you mean by contagious? Which can easily spread actually. Cell A has osmotic pressure 10 atmosphere, turgor pressure of 7 atmosphere, and diffusion pressure deficit, that is the DPD, is 3 atmosphere. Cell B has osmotic pressure of 8 atmosphere, turgor pressure is 3 atmosphere, and diffusion pressure DPD is again 5 atmosphere. The result will be dash. So this is a very easy question. It is related to the earlier question that we saw in this presentation. Movement of the water will be from the, see, whenever you see the concept of DBD, I told you it is from the lower concentration to the higher concentration. Did I say it in the earlier presentation? I mean in the earlier part. So here what happens is, movement of water will be low for DBD to high DBD, that is from A to B. Therefore, the correct answer will be movement of water from cell A to B. What is A here? See, turgor pressure is 7, B has osmotic pressure of 8. Again, the turgor pressure is 3 and the diffusion pressure DBD is 5. What will be the result? A and B are contagious. So, A has atmospheric pressure of 10 and cell B has atmospheric pressure of 8. Since it is from lower to higher concentration, the movement of particles is from A to B. Okay, you have to compare all the pressure ends. You just don't have to see only about the osmotic pressure. You have to see the DBD here. DBD of A is 3 while the DBD of B is 5. It is moving from lower to higher concentration. So, as I said, B here is 5 while A is only 3. Therefore, it is 3 to 5. Therefore, the correct answer is option C, movement of water from cell A to B. Okay, now you can understand. Don't look at the osmotic pressure here. Look at the DBD. Okay, you have to see the DBD and answer. Just don't blankly look at the osmotic pressure, because the osmotic pressure of A is higher than B. You should look at the DBD and answer. Okay, now let's move to the next question here. When water moves through a semi-permeable membrane, then which of the following pressure develops? Okay, this is once again an easy question here. What does semi-permeability means? Semi means partly, right? We all know that. Semi means partly. What do you mean by permeable? See, in our day-to-day life, the cell that is present in a living organism faces a lot of circumstances where it meets different molecules, different ions that come in, then come in and go. They go out, and that's a huge process, in fact. So imagine if every ion and every molecule that is going to enter the cell has to be monitored, and everything cannot enter into it. So that permeability is also called as selectivity. Only few atoms, few ions, few molecules can only gain entry into the cell, into the membrane, into the cell membrane of the cell. Not everything can pass through it. Therefore, it is very important that the cell has this nature of semi-permeability. Now coming to the answer. So, as I already said, the important feature of osmotic pressure is it is moving from the lower to, osmosis is from moving from the lower to the higher concentration. The hydrostatic pressure developed inside the cell wall is due to the endo-osmosis, which is called as Sturger pressure. So what is Sturger pressure? I told you. What is Sturger pressure? TP is Sturger pressure. Okay, the hydrostatic pressure developed inside the cell due to the endo-osmosis is called as Sturger pressure. Due to the Sturger pressure, the rigid cell wall offers a resistance. This resistance, which works in the direction opposite to the Sturger pressure, is called as wall pressure. So this is wall pressure. Okay, therefore the correct answer to this question is osmotic pressure. Okay, as I already said, osmotic pressure is required because movement of lower to higher concentration is quite a tedious process when it comes to cell membrane. So this will maintain that semi-permeability in that. When the water moves through a semi-permeable membrane, which of the pressure will develop? If you see, it is osmotic pressure. Okay. So option A is the answer. Now let's move to the next question here. This question was asked in the year 1999. Okay. Water potential of actively absorbing cells is dash. Now, what is water potential? It is regarded as the tendency of the water to leave the system. It will leave the system. Remember this, okay? Leave the system. Pure water has the highest possible water potential, and you know what is the standard water potential? It is 0, right? All solutions have water potential which is lower than water. All solutions, when you take mixture of any solution, they will be less than 0. Remember this. So what happens if it is less than 0? If it goes below 0, it will always be denoted with a negative sign. Therefore, the correct answer to this question is option B, always negative. Okay. See, when you compare water and solution, water has a standard water potential of 0. Now, whatever solution which you take will always be less than 0. So, that is why it is always negative. Next question here. It was asked in the year 1998. Okay, let's read it here. The water potential and osmotic potential of pure water is. So, we know that water potential, which is a standard one, and it does not have any changes in it. So, it is 0. Now, how about the osmotic potential? We know water potential is 0. What about osmotic potential? The osmotic potential is the potential of the solution to cause movement of water across the semi-permeable membrane. See, water has to move into the semi-permeable membrane. Okay. So, osmotic potential is the potential of the solution to cause movement of water into or across a semi-permeable membrane. Water potential is a tendency of the water to leave the system. Now, we know that the water potential is 0. If the water potential is 0, then the osmotic potential will also be 0. Why? See, both the system is talking about the water. Okay, osmotic potential also, if you see, it is the movement of water across the semipermeable membrane. Water potential means it is the system will leave the water out of the system. So here water potential is 0, and therefore the osmotic potential is also 0. And we all know that potential of a solution to cause the movement of water across or into the semipermeable membrane is called as osmotic potential. Therefore the correct answer to this question is option A. Both the values are 0. Okay, next question here. Now this question was asked in the year 1997, which, okay, with increase in the turgidity of the cell surrounded by water, the cell wall, the wall pressure will dash. Okay, what do you mean by turgidity? We already saw what is turgid pressure and osmotic pressure. What do you mean by turgid first? Turgid means swollen or distended, or you can say it is congested. Okay. Now turgid pressure also, it symbolically tells you that. Now with increase in the turgidity of this cell surrounded by water, the wall pressure will also increase. Why? It's already swollen, it will only try to expand. Okay, therefore the answer is clear. With the increase in the turgidity of the cell surrounded by water, the wall pressure will also increase. Okay, easy question in fact. Next question, 1997 again. Water potential in a leaf tissue is positive during which? Okay, now we know water potential is 0. The standard value is 0 now. They are asking for a leaf tissue now. Okay, pure water has a maximum water potential, and that is denoted by 0. Water potential in a leaf tissue becomes greater than pure water under conditions of excessive humidity. So when the humidity is excess means beyond the normal value. Okay, then the value will go higher than the water potential, right? So when the leaves cannot lose water by transpiration, hence water loss is happening through droplets. Water loss will be through droplets. You must have observed in plants, sometimes there will be water droplets on the leaves, which symbolically tells you that it has more water. It is trying to let it out with the help of formation of droplets. Okay, so now this droplet formation, you call it as gatuation in English. In science you will call it as. Okay, now water potential in a leaf tissue is positive, which means the humidity is in excess. Therefore the correct answer to this question is called as guttation. Okay, so you must have observed in the after you water the plants, after some time you must have seen that there are presence of water droplets over the leaf surface. So when it cannot transfer, or when it cannot let the water out through transpiration. What do you mean by transpiration? The water which is let out through the stomata, right? So when it can't do that system, it will actually it will do a water letting process through a process called droplet formation. So that is called as guttation in science. Okay, therefore the correct answer to this question is option D. Okay, so here in the last part they have said, hence water is lost as droplets via hydrothodes. Okay, which is called as guttation in science. So excess water, when there is no chance for it to transpiration, where there is no chance of transpiration, droplets are formed so that the water loss, the excess water is moved away from the plant. It is removed from the plant. So hence the correct answer is option D. With this we complete the part 1 transport in plants. We will all meet in the next part of the same chapter. Thank you.